start off with, I'm going to be talking about how to prepare for the BMAT. And I would say right from the start, if there's nothing else that you take from this session, just remember that URL there at the bottom of the slide. That will actually sort of take you to the admissions testing BMAT website, and there's lots of material there, past papers, support material, all sorts of things available completely for free. And that will give you all of the information that you need in order to prepare to actually sort of ace the BMAT. So bearing that in mind, I'll sort of move on, and I'm going to talk through about the, why you have to sort of take the BMAT, how useful it is. Also sort of take you through the actual sort of structure of the BMAT, what types of questions are there, and then we'll have a go at working through a number of examples of questions that have been taken from past papers of the BMAT. And I'll actually tell you not only what the correct answer is, but actually how we'd expect you to work through that. And that will give you some sort of tips and some strategies for approaching the BMAT when you actually sort of sit it for real. And I'll sort of end with a few sort of tips for how to actually sort of prepare for the BMAT, and a few more tips about what to do actually sort of on the day of taking the BMAT. And I'll be happy to answer any sort of questions afterwards. I will say my focus is going to be on the BMAT itself. So I'm not going to talk about how you register for the BMAT, or where you might sit it and so on. All of that information is there on the website, and you can access it when you're ready for things like that. So I often get asked, why do I have to take the BMAT? What's the point of it? I've done my A-levels. Isn't that enough for the universities and for the medical schools? Well, universities and the medical schools get lots of different sort of people applying, coming from a range of places, countries, and so on, who all have very different examination sort of structures and so on. So the advantage of the BMAT is it is actually one piece of information that is common to all of the applicants to that particular medical school. It also helps them to actually select between candidates who on paper look very similar. You may have very sort of similar A-level results and GCSE results to others. So the BMAT really helps the universities and the medical schools to really differentiate between sort of different candidates. It also helps them to identify those students who are actually sort of thinking in the right ways, and actually sort of using their knowledge and applying it in the sorts of ways that they would actually be doing when they become medical students. So it helps them to identify if you're the right sort of student for their course. It also helps you to sort of realize that, are you thinking in the right sort of ways? Would you enjoy sort of having sort of this sort of knowledge and trying to apply it in different sort of situations? So it's also a way for you to know if you're the right student for the course. And finally, I'd just like to say that, the BMAT is just one part of the application process. All of the medical schools will take many different sort of things into consideration. So, the BMAT, your score on the BMAT isn't the be all and end all of the application process. It is just one part of it, and it's something that the universities and the medical schools actually sort of use to make their decisions in, consideration with many other sort of elements. So, don't focusing on it as being absolutely sort of essential and it's the one thing that determines whether you get to medical school. It's just part of that application process. So having sort of said that, just sort of move on to thinking about how we actually sort of prepare for the test. And to be honest, the best way to do that is to actually get really familiar with the structure and to sort of know what to expect when we're looking at the BMAT. So BMAT is divided up into 3 different sections. That's 3 different papers. And you will actually sort of sit them individually. So you'll sit section 1, the aptitude and skills or thinking skills sort of paper, and then you will move on to sort of section 2, scientific knowledge and applications, and then you will move on to section 3, the writing task. So you don't get all 3 papers sort of in front of you at once. You go through them sort of one after the other. So for section 1, as I said, that's aptitude and skills or sort of thinking skills. So it's a 1-hour paper. You have 32 multiple choice questions. Each question is worth sort of 1 mark. So you don't have, different sort of marks for sort of different questions. And as with all of the sort of BMAT sort of questions, there are no marks lost for incorrect answers. You just get 1 mark for a correct answer, and sort of that's it. As I said, section 1 is 32 multiple choice questions that you're doing in an hour. So you've got just under, on average, you've got just under 2 minutes for each sort of question. And those are about sort of problem solving and critical thinking. Section 2 is what we call the scientific knowledge and application paper. So this is a little bit more of a sort of hectic sort of pace, because you've got 30 minutes to answer 27 multiple choice questions. So that's just over 1 minute for each question. Again, it's 1 mark for a correct answer, no marks lost for sort of incorrect answers, multiple choice questions, and they're looking at you applying your knowledge of biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. We'll talk through those questions and exactly what knowledge they're expecting you to sort of apply a little bit later. Section 3 is the writing task. So you have 30 minutes to write 1 short essay, and it is very short, as we'll be sort of discussing sort of later, but you pick from a choice of 3 different sort of questions. And as I said, it's writing a very sort of short essay, and we'll talk through the nature of the questions, what sort of topics they might sort of cover, and some strategies in a little bit. So looking at the different sort of sections and the types of questions, as you can see from the slide, under section 1, we've got both problem solving and critical thinking. With problem solving, we've got questions which expect you to select the relevant information. We've got recognizing analogous cases. So that's sort of similarities. So you might have, for instance, a diagram or a graph and some written information, and you're actually sort of identifying some of the sort of similarities between those different sort of presentations of data. And you've also got this idea of applying appropriate procedures. So that might be doing calculations and applying those in order to work through to getting the correct answer. Critical thinking is very much around sort of arguments and summarizing the conclusions of arguments, identifying any assumptions that may be made, or how introducing some additional evidence or data might actually sort of change the argument, detecting flaws or errors in the reasoning that's being made, or sort of matching sort of arguments that have very similar sort of structures, or how to go about applying general principles to specific cases. As you can see with section 2, it's all about biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And with section 3, the essay questions, and they tend to be on very much sort of philosophical, scientific, or medical topics. So there's some sort of ethics and morality sort of involved in there, but very much sort of general sort of thinking about things. So moving on to thinking about sort of section 1, and we've got an example here of one of the critical thinking questions. So as I'm talking through it, please sort of read through the slide, and if you actually sort of decide on an answer, you're quite welcome to post it in the comments, sort of either A, B, C, or D. With all of the multiple choice questions, it's always 1 correct sort of answer that you're looking for. So it's never going to be, for instance, sort of A and B. It's always going to be just one correct answer. And they always follow the same pattern of, you have maybe a sort of a paragraph of text, which is actually putting forward an argument, and then you will have a question underneath it. Sometimes these questions can be, what is the conclusion that's come to in this argument? In this case, you can see that it's actually sort of asking you to identify a flaw in the argument. So some kind of sort of flaw in the reasoning that's being sort of presented with the question. So another thing to sort of bear in mind is, with these critical thinking questions, we're not expecting you to bring in any additional knowledge. All of the information that you actually sort of need for a critical thinking question is there in the text. So with this example, you don't need to be an expert musician. You don't need to know about sort of brain waves or electrical activity or anything like that. You can actually sort of follow through these sort of arguments. And I can see that some people are starting to sort of post their sort of answers here. So just very quickly sort of talk through. So it's putting forward an argument that, you know, our brains sort of synchronize to the tempo of music, and scientists have found that there's a difference between musicians and non-musicians, in that while both groups actually sort of were able to synchronize to the tempo and to the rhythms, so non-musicians didn't really synchronize to particularly sort of slow music. They found it difficult to keep track of the tempo. And the argument is that this shows that becoming a musician requires an innate tendency for the brain to synchronize to the tempo of any speed of music. So looking at the options that we've got, we can see that, you know, for instance, option D doesn't really sort of address that sort of argument. You know, it's just saying it might depend on a number of different abilities. So, you know, we can sort of bring that in. It doesn't really sort of change the sort of argument. And with many of the other sort of options, you know, it's really just, it doesn't really affect the actual sort of flow of the argument. You know, tempo of slow music might be the most difficult for listeners to follow. That applies for both musicians and sort of non-musicians. And as we can see in the sort of comments there, the actual correct answer has been selected, which is B, that musical training may develop the tendency for the brain to synchronize. So that's really sort of addressing that final sentence in the paragraph, where it actually says that becoming a musician requires an innate tendency. So, you know, there is a flaw there in that it's assuming that you have to have this innate ability to synchronize to the tempo of any speed of music, and that it can't be developed and sort of trained. So well done if you selected sort of B as your sort of correct answer. That is the correct answer for that question. So I'm going to move on to one of our problem solving questions. So here we've got an example where a publisher produces magazines, all of which have a number of pages which are a multiple of 32. So they can have 32, 64, 96, and so on sort of pages. The front cover is always counted as page 1. And what it's asking you is, what would be the page numbers for the center spread of any one of these sort of magazines? So just take a moment to sort of have a look there. Clearly, you know, you've got less than or around sort of 2 minutes to answer on average to answer one of these sort of questions. So we're not going to expect you to be counting through sort of, you know, pages, whether in your mind or sort of on the paper. So we need to sort of think smartly, think specifically, and really sort of use the information that we're actually sort of given. So first of all, if we're thinking that, you know, we're talking about the center spread, and if the front cover is page 1, then the next page is going to be sort of page 2. And if we've got a center spread, then it's going to be an even number on the left-hand side and an odd number on the right-hand side. So given that, we can actually immediately eliminate options A and D because they have an odd number on the left-hand side and an even number on the right-hand side. So we've now sort of brought it down to 3 options. So thinking about that, if we've got all these magazines are a multiple of 32 pages, that means that the center spread, it's going to be a multiple of half of 32 because it's halfway through. So it's going to be multiples of 16. And looking at the options, both B and C, you know, the numbers there are not going to be sort of multiples of 16. So we can actually eliminate those and get to our correct answer of E, 96 and 97. So hopefully that's a very sort of quick sort of process. It doesn't involve sort of counting and sort of calculations, but it's a way of approaching these problem solving sort of questions in a very sort of logical and methodical manner, much the same as we do with the critical thinking questions that you've already seen. So that gives you a good idea, hopefully, of how to approach the critical thinking questions and problem solving questions that you'll find in the section 1 sort of paper. So I'm going to move on to looking at sort of section 2, which is particularly the scientific knowledge and application of that knowledge. And we'll be looking at questions around biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. So I'm going to start with a biology question. So as you can see, this is a question about the kidney and the associated sort of vessels. So it's expecting you to know about the kidney, to be able to recognize from the diagram that it's the kidney there on the sort of far right of the slide, and to have some idea of what the other area, the sort of vessels and elements which are sort of numbered sort of on there, and also to know about the function of the kidney. So you'll notice that it doesn't ask you specifically about what is the function of the kidney or what are these, you know, particular sort of numbered sort of vessels and elements, but you need that knowledge and you need to apply the knowledge in order to be able to come to the correct answer. So if we're thinking about the kidney, its function is to really sort of filter the blood, to draw out impurities, and particularly to concentrate the urea within the kidney. So if we're looking at the sort of diagram there, you know, and that second column of the sort of options for the answers, the first two, A and B, are talking about the highest concentration of urea being in sort of veins or aorta. So it's not going to be sort of found there. The highest concentration is actually going to be around the kidney itself. You know, those vessels are taking the blood to and from the sort of kidney, whereas the other options, C, D, E, and F, actually sort of indicate that element 5 is the sort of correct answer for highest concentration of urea. So we can eliminate options A and B. So we're now looking at options C, D, E, and F. You can see that, still keeping with that second column, that all of them are focused on number 5 in the diagram and what that is. And if you think about your knowledge of the sort of kidney, so it's saying that 5 is either the urethra or the ureter. So hopefully you'll know that it's the ureter that goes from the kidney to the bladder, and it's the urethra that comes from the bladder and allows for the expulsion of urine. So number 5 must be the ureter in this example. So we've now got it down from 6 options to just sort of 2 options. One of them must be the correct answer. So we've really sort of, you know, taken it down. If you got to this point and then you just needed a guess, then, you know, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting the correct answer. With the multiple choice questions with BMAT, it is always worth sort of making a guess once you've eliminated some of the options. You don't lose any marks for an incorrect answer, and you might just get lucky. So if you're running out of time, I would say just take a guess. But with here, so how do we actually decide between sort of D and D? Well, if we start looking at the first column, so it's saying option D is saying that 3 is a renal vein, and option E is saying that 4 is a renal vein. So if we look at the sort of diagrams, 3 and 4 connect up to 1 and 2. And if you look at 1, that's actually got quite a thin wall and quite a wide sort of channel or sort of lumen, whereas element 2 is actually quite a thick wall and quite a narrow sort of lumen. So that shows us that it must be an artery, whereas number 1 must be a vein. So that allows us to work out that number 3 must be the renal vein. So our correct answer in this question is actually option D. So move on to a chemistry question. I'm certainly not a sort of chemist. My chemistry knowledge is sort of fairly basic. But sort of looking at this, I can see that it's actually sort of talking about a reversible reaction, and we're asking you to identify which of the following sort of changes could actually sort of result in more carbon monoxide being sort of removed. So with my basic sort of chemistry knowledge, I can look at this and think, okay, option E, is that possible? Well, nitrogen is an inert gas. And if we're talking about it being at constant pressure, then that's really not going to make any sort of difference. So we can probably eliminate E. Option A, adding a catalyst. Well, even I know that adding a catalyst just sort of speeds up the rate of the reaction. And that goes both ways with a reversible sort of reaction. So that's not actually going to sort of change the equilibrium or anything like that. So we've now got it down to B, C, and sort of D. So B and C are options of increasing or decreasing the pressure, whereas option D is actually about the sort of temperature. We are told that it is an exothermic sort of reaction. So I can see that somebody has already come to the correct answer. It is sort of D. Decreasing the temperature is what would actually sort of result in more carbon monoxide being sort of removed. So hopefully that's again sort of shown you how applying some just basic sort of chemistry knowledge and a bit of reasoning actually allows you to get to the answer to this question so quite quickly and quite effectively. I will say that the correct answer isn't always sort of D. So it might be from the sort of last two examples, but it isn't always the case. So now I'm going to move on to a physics question. And I know a lot of people tend to be a bit worried about physics questions, particularly if they're not doing A-level sort of physics. So I will stress that with BMAT, it's always a GCSE level of knowledge that we're actually sort of expecting. So it doesn't really sort of matter whether or not you're doing A-levels of physics. So in this example, we've got a question and it's actually around the density of a material. So you need to know what density is. Actually, if you look at the options there on the right-hand side, you can actually see, because they're all sort of density measurements, they're all grams over centimeters cubed. So we actually sort of know that density is mass over volume. So we've already got that sort of calculation. Looking at the sort of information that we're presented with, we can start thinking about, okay, first of all, let's start thinking about the actual sort of mass, the weight, and what's being sort of shown on the balance for these objects. So we've got the balance there with no measuring cylinder on it, which is registering 20 grams. We've then got the balance with a measuring cylinder with just liquid in it, and that measures 170 grams. And then placing one of these sort of objects in there, we can see that it goes up to 470 grams. So 470 minus 170, we can know that the weight, the mass of one of these sort of objects is actually going to be sort of 300. And looking at our options to the side there, we can actually very quickly eliminate sort of most of the options. And so we're just left with the two options that have the mass as being sort of 300 grams. So again, you know, we've got a 50-50 sort of chance of getting to the correct answer now, but we can actually apply a bit of our own, more of our own sort of knowledge and using the information that's given there in the question. So if we're thinking about the actual sort of volume of these solid objects, we can see that with two of the objects in there, the measuring cylinder is now showing 350 cubic centimeters as opposed to 250. 350 minus 250 would give us 100. You might think that's option E, but remember that in that sort of final sort of column, it's actually two of the objects. So 100 is for two of the objects. Halve that, we get to 50. It has turned out to be D again as the option, but that is the correct answer to this sort of physics question. So I'll very quickly show you a mathematics question. You might think at first, oh, it's talking about mass again. Isn't that a physics question? It's actually asking you to calculate sort of means and to know what the mean is in terms of sort of total number and total mass and so on. So using a bit of algebra, you can actually sort of quite quickly sort of calculate what the value of n is, which is the number of people sort of in the group without the additional sort of 3 people. I'll give people a moment if you want to have a quick sort of go at answering this sort of question. I will give you a clue that the correct answer is not D this time. So I'll just give you a moment. See if we've got any guesses or I will remind you that in BMAT you don't have a calculator when you're actually sort of sitting the exam. So everything does have to be done, you know, your own brain power, although you can actually sort of write and do calculations on the question paper itself. The question paper is actually sort of separate from the answer paper. But in this example, the correct answer is actually B. The value of n is 12. So I'm going to move on from looking at the actual sort of questions to talk about what we call the Section 2 guide or the Section 2 knowledge guide. And this is available for free for you to access on the admissions testing sort of website. Again, we've got the URL there. And if you go there, you can actually sort of register and gain access to the guide. And the guide is quite a detailed sort of explanation of all of the scientific and mathematical knowledge that we're actually assuming you have when it comes to the sort of BMAT. So we recognize that, you know, many of you will be doing sort of different qualifications, following sort of different curricula, you know, with different exam boards and so on. So we've really sort of taken all of the sort of knowledge that you do really sort of need and put it into this Section 2 guide. So it actually serves as quite a good revision guide for you to just kind of remind yourselves of anything that you might have studied at GCSE. But for instance, if you're not doing A-level physics, then you might be a little bit rusty on it. So I would say go to the overview, the Section 2 guide, and actually sort of brush up on things, and that will help you sort of identify the different areas that you might need just a little bit of sort of reminding and a little bit of extra sort of preparation for the BMAT. You also will find on the website the BMAT specification, so that actually just lists all of the topics that can be sort of asked questions about within sort of BMAT Section 2. So that's actually a good way to a good place to start your preparation, actually sort of going through that and just thinking, okay, I've covered that in my GCSE, I've covered it out. Actually, that's something that we didn't cover, or I'm a little bit rusty about. So I'll actually sort of use that to take me through to the Section 2 guide and brush up on those areas. Also sort of emphasize that the knowledge level is GCSE level. Okay, so we're not expecting you to have A-level knowledge of any of these sort of areas, but it's your GCSE knowledge, but the style of questions is much more sort of A-level, in that it's not asking you to just repeat sort of knowledge, to repeat sort of definitions. It's actually asking you to apply that knowledge, to work through and to reason through to get the correct answers, as we've seen with the previous examples. So move on to talking about Section 3, the essay section, or the writing task with sort of BMAT. So as a reminder, the topics will be sort of philosophical, scientific, or sort of medical. And really, we don't assume, again, any sort of other additional sort of knowledge for sort of Section 3. It really allows you to use your own sort of knowledge, your own sort of understanding, and to really sort of get into quite a meaty sort of question and try and explore it and come up with some ideas. So we have here an example of one of the sort of questions sort of taken from BMAT. So as you can see, they all follow a similar sort of structure of having a statement and then some other sort of questions to kind of guide you to how to approach the actual sort of task. A reminder that you do have a single side of A4 to write on. If you have been allowed to use a computer, then there will be a sort of a word limit. But for those who are sort of handwriting this sort of task, it's actually a single side of A4. So if you do go over to the other side of the sort of paper or outside of the answer box, that doesn't get marked by the examiners. Okay, so anything that's on the other side or sort of out of that just gets ignored. What we're actually sort of assessing is what you've actually sort of written on that one side of A4 paper. And what we're looking at is the quality of the content of your response. So how well you've actually sort of argued, the ideas that you've actually sort of brought up, the conclusions that you've drawn. And we're also looking at the quality of the English that you're using. So just to focus a little bit more on this example of a sort of question, as you can see, there is a sort of statement there. Sometimes you will find the statement is actually a quotation from a famous scientist, for instance. And then it will start asking you a few sort of questions to really sort of direct you and to get you thinking about how to go about answering this task. And really, they all follow the same sort of pattern. So you will find one of the questions is just asking you what this statement means. So it's asking you to give your interpretation of what you think this might mean. So there is money to be made from not curing disease. You know, you might be thinking, okay, maybe it's that pharmaceutical companies actually can make a lot of money from, you know, not offering cures, but just offering sort of things to alleviate the symptoms of a particular sort of disease. Then the second sort of statement is, in this case, asking you to argue to the contrary. So it's really sort of coming up with some counter arguments, some ways to oppose the actual sort of statement and to bring in a different sort of view. So, you know, a counter argument might be, well, actually, if people aren't sort of generating sort of cures for diseases, they're not going to be making money, they're not going to be sort of successful. Nobody's going to be interested in just sort of alleviating the symptoms if they know that there could be a cure. So this may be a counter argument. And then the final part of it is really asking you to say if you agree or disagree with the statement. And what's important there, as it is throughout this writing task, is for you to actually sort of justify it. Don't just say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. You actually need to say, I agree because I think this, and because of this reason. And although I've considered this counter argument, I still come to the conclusion that I agree with the statement. So that's a very sort of quick way to actually sort of explore and to sort of start addressing the writing task, the essay task. And what the markers are actually sort of looking for is, first of all, have you actually addressed the question in the way that's being asked? So those sort of sub-questions, you know, we really want you to actually be responding to those sort of prompts and to be addressing the question in the way that those indicate. We're asking you to actually sort of organize your thoughts, to present a clear and logical sort of argument for your own particular sort of view. So that does need to be sort of structured and a little bit of sort of planned out. We also expect you to maybe use some of your own general knowledge and your own sort of opinions and sort of views with sort of applying to it. And finally, we are expecting you to express yourselves using concise, compelling, and correct English. So although we will be taking marks off you for, you know, incorrect sort of spellings or sort of missed punctuation, it does need to be easily understandable, and you also do need to be concise. As I've said, you've got one side of A4 paper for answering this question. So just very briefly, key to answering the writing task in section 3 is to actually sort of plan and structure your argument, your response. So make sure you're really clear about what the question is actually sort of asking you to do. Don't go off on a tangent or start trying to sort of crowbar in a prepared sort of question that you already sort of have. Make sure you are actually answering the question, and make sure that it is clear and logical, that you always justify, you always give the reasons why you think a particular sort of thing. And you can actually sort of use the question paper to write down your sort of plan. And I would suggest that it's actually sort of worth using the empty sort of space on the paper, which is, you know, the reason why it's there is to give you this opportunity to plan things out. And really sort of planning out the structure of the argument, what points you want to make, is really key to a successful section 3 response. So, you know, you can just give it a very sort of basic plan of, you want to have an introduction explaining what the statement means, give a few reasons in support of the statement, a few counter arguments, and then you might think about your particular, the strongest reason for actually agreeing with the statement, and then draw it to a conclusion by explaining what your own position is, whether you agree or disagree, and the reasons for sort of doing that. So again, a very sort of quick sort of tour through things. Looking forwards towards preparing for the test, I just say, you know, look at the test specification, look at the past papers so that you are familiar with the format as well as the sort of content. As I said, there are lots and lots of past papers, all available for free on the admissions testing website. Use the section 2 knowledge guides so that you revise things, go back to your GCSE notes. Hopefully you haven't thrown them out after you were successful in your GCSEs. So use those, revise those. Just keep abreast of scientific and medical topics that are in the news. And that will actually give you sort of information that you can use in your section 3 answer, but also when it comes to thinking about the critical thinking sort of questions. They're often sort of presenting a particular sort of viewpoint. So you will actually get more experience if you're keeping familiar with current sort of news around science and medicine. I would say definitely work through some of the questions from the BMAT past papers. As I said, they are available for free. So, you know, work through them, get familiar with them, have a look at what you've done, review your sort of work. So think about the sort of answers, and there are actually some papers on the BMAT website where it actually sort of goes through the reasoning to get to the correct answer, as well as sort of supplying the correct answer. So have a look at those, compare them to your own sort of reasoning, and are you thinking along the right sorts of lines? And finally, the very best thing that you can do to prepare for the test is actually make yourself sit down with a past paper and do it under timed exam conditions. So no calculators, having the time limits, having the writing limits, no books there in sort of front of you. And even just doing this with one or two of the past papers really sort of makes a difference, and really sort of gets you familiar with the structure of the tests, with how you're sort of thinking, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and also the time limits, knowing just how long it takes you to write one side of A4 paper, and does that fit into the 30 minutes, is really sort of helpful. So final sort of tips for the, on the day itself, think about how much time you can devote to each question. Is it an average of 2 minutes or sort of 1 minute? If you are getting stuck on a question, then just move on, come back to it sort of later. If you're unsure of an answer, but you can quickly sort of eliminate a few options, then have a guess. As I said, there are no sort of marks lost for incorrect answer. So if you're running out of time, it's always worth making an informed sort of guess on things. Also, use the question paper itself. Although you're not allowed a calculator, you're not allowed sort of scrap paper, you can use the question paper for actually sort of doing workings out. You can underline words in the questions or draw diagrams, anything and everything that will help you. You're actually sort of able to do that. And finally, when you're faced with an unfamiliar sort of context or an area, then just think about what knowledge you have and what knowledge and information is there in the question, and how you can actually sort of use that to solve the problem that you've been given. Summarizing it all, BMAT, don't panic about it. It's all sort of, relatively sort of easy. You actually sort of know these things. You can handle the questions. They're not asking you impossible questions. They are all sort of answerable. So don't worry about it. Don't panic. Be familiar with what the BMAT looks like and what the questions look like, which you can already have that information now, having gone through this session. And I would say just enjoy your subject. So enjoy actually sort of dealing with these questions, and that option, that sort of chance for you to really sort of get to grips with your sort of questions and how you actually sort of approach it. And finally, as I said before, just give yourself some practice. Make yourself sit everything in the, under test conditions, just one or two of the past papers, and it will really sort of help you with sort of things. So hopefully that's been sort of helpful to all of you. If you do have any sort of questions, I'm quite happy to answer a few in the few minutes that we have left. But I just say, go to the admissions testing sort of website, and you will find all of the information that you need to absolutely ace the BMAT. And thank you very much.